Welcome back. My guest today, he's the founder of a genetic research company. He has incredible insights on your genetics, so many things that you can do to make yourself live longer, have a happier life, and come to the recognition that health is not a one-size-fits-all product. I want to welcome to the program today, Mr. Kashif Khan. How you doing today, sir?
Pleasure, man. Good to be here.
I watched a bunch of your interviews, really, really great stuff. I've just been reading stuff recently about estrogens and different toxins that are in our environment. And you mentioned something that I really loved. And you, so I just finished Estrogeneration. One of the things they talk about in the book is the concept of you can't feel the estrogens when they get into your body. You said you had a really great quote, which was, "You don't feel avoiding cancer."
Yeah.
You can't feel it.
These chronic diseases don't start the day you got diagnosed or you got sick.
Yeah.
7, 10, sometimes 15 years of lingering inflammation. And the final outcome of this cancer or cardiovascular disease, diabetes, you're going to feel it the day you're in pain and you ask the doctor to fix the pain. But developing, you don't know what's happening.
Yeah.
Exposed to endocrine disruptors, whether it's an environmental, chemical, that's why you feel safe. Because for now, things are okay until it's not okay.
Yeah.
Right?
And also you're getting, like you said before, the one size fits all understanding or advice from medical professionals or just sort of standard advice. And you just feel safe being under the middle of the standard deviation, in the middle of the bell curve. You said you ran a marketing company for tech startups. You got sick and that's how this started you on your journey.
See, I had never been sick prior to that. I never needed a doctor other than, a few things when I was young. But as an adult, I was good. And all of a sudden, I had eczema all over my face. I had psoriasis, which is autoimmune, different than the inflammation for the eczema. Gut issues, migraine issues, depression issues, didn't want to get out of bed. So I had simple questions for the doctors, which is, what did I do? Right? This is not serendipity. This is not a coincidence. Why did all this stuff all happen at once? And that's when I, for the first time, realized that's not what they do.
Yeah.
They don't answer that. They don't even bother investigating. It's here's what it's called. Here's what we're going to prescribe, and this is how long it takes to manage, which is the rest of your life.
They're basically an algorithm.
Yeah, it's and it's the check mark of success is that the pain is suppressed to some degree. You can now function.
Yeah,
and that blew my mind because something was happening inside, and it was going to cause something else. There was already 5 things, and the next started. And then I started getting reflux. Right, so the 6th started. So that's when I went through this journey of functional health, naturopathy, traditional Chinese medicine, even homeopathy. And started to learn that there's people out there that think differently, that do ask why. And so in as much as medicine is, here's what it's called and here's how to fix it, the why that's the journey I went down, and discovering my human genome really opened my eyes to personalization. And it really opened my eyes to the why, once again. I used to go to lunch with my business partner at this restaurant down the street from our office, entertaining clients. And he ate the exact same food as me. He lived in the same neighborhood, similar lifestyle. He didn't have any of the problems I had. There's a gene called GSTM1, which is a first line of defense for your gut. So as you're eating, the toxins, pesticides, plastics that come along with it, it's meant to block, detoxify, and excrete. Pee, poop, sweat, right? I'm missing that gene. Don't have it. Not even what version, what variant. I literally don't have that piece of instruction in my human DNA. So I got sick from the same thing that didn't make him sick because I couldn't process it properly. That is what truly opened my eyes to there's so much more to health and wellness and wait to get sick and die and manage it. And I built this research company out of it.
We talk a lot about evolutionary psychology on this program. In a function of natural selection, there's something that happened with your ancestors that did not need this gene. I remember reading somewhere there's certain Sherpas that live in northern latitude or higher altitudes in Nepal, and they produce more red blood cells. It's just a genetic variant that they have. Have you found these things to be different? I know you mentioned before, I believe when you're talking to Tom Bilyeu, about the concept of having darker skin, your body doesn't process as much vitamin D, whereas you need more vitamin D if you are at higher latitudes and you might have fairer skin. Are there other differences that you've seen, like ethnically?
So use me as an example, talking about the mind. I learned that I'm wired with what's called warrior genetics.
Okay.
And if I look at my ancestry, I was in a museum once, but if you look at my WhatsApp profile pics, it's a guy with a turban smoking a shisha pipe.
Okay.
Who is that guy? A painting that I saw in a museum of some king, and my mom said that, oh, that's your great, 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 great something grandfather. I was like, why did you tell me this before, right? I found out I came from a warrior lineage in Afghanistan. And why? Dopamine is the neurochemical that allows you to experience pleasure or reward. So eat some food, achieve something, success, satisfaction. The binders or receptors in your brain are regulated by a gene called DRD2. I have the worst version of that gene. So the intensity level that I feel pleasure or reward is not enough. There's a protein called COMP that eliminates the dopamine out of your head. I have the fastest possible version of that. So when it comes to seeking reward, the warrior that's leading the pack, I can't get enough satisfaction. Always taking the next risk, always doing the next big thing, right? There's also a gene around serotonin regulation. So serotonin is a mood regulating chemical. How are you reacting versus the level of stimulus? Is it appropriate, or are you more irritable or more frustrated? And that's me, right? So the mechanism is serotonin allows your brain to prioritize all the stimulus around you. We're chatting here.
Yeah.
If there's a sound in the background, do I filter it out, or is like I can't focus?
Yes.
Right? That's me. So I have this heightened level of awareness. Every little detail matters, and I'm highly reward seeking. That combination equals high functioning anxiety. I can't stop. Everything matters, trying to perfect everything, trying to do everything. Warrior genetics, right? So now put that in, go sit in the middle of a classroom, ADHD, bad grades, behavioral issues, put that in CEO, functions amazing, right? So knowing the context that fits your role, where your ancestors came from.
Yeah, it's interesting. I had Dr. Richard Reeves from the Brookings Institute on, and he was talking about how the modern education system is actually designed a little bit better for females than males because of the kind of the thing you said before. It's difficult in an academic environment. Women just tend to have a temperament that works better in that type of environment, where boys, like you said before, they just want to attack things. They have a little bit more of a warrior mentality. I do think this is really interesting because the American Psychological Association, they seem to not have differentiating ideas for men and women when it comes to the ideas of like testosterone. They seem to be like a one-size-fits-all treatment for certain depressions and psychological disorders. And I think you keep talking about serotonin, dopamine, we talk about norepinephrine, estrogen, and testosterone, and there's like a massive difference that people have. But I think and I don't know if you've gotten this pushback, the idea that so much of what we end up doing and which stimulus ends up affecting us has to do with our genetics is offensive to a lot of people because it removes agency and free will from some of them. And to the point when you look at the Old Testament or you look in the Quran, when it talks about free will, that a lot of times that is where things become offensive. Like I said, I studied evolutionary psychology as a hobby. And what I found is that people on the left don't like evolutionary psychology because it defines gender roles in our ancestral past, and people on the right don't like evolutionary psychology because it's Darwin. You know, they don't like the concept of natural selection. I'm just wondering, do you get pushback like this before, like sort of, because what you're explaining to a certain extent is determinism, genetic determinism.
Yeah, we used to get a lot of pushback from the left, right? Yeah. And now they're all coming to us asking for help because what they're doing, it's not working. Yeah. Right. And so when you push it to that extreme where you're going to see the edge of your problems, the big problems, then you kind of come back to the middle. Like this isn't working, right? Yeah. So the vast majority of who we help are women. And I never intended this. I didn't even know how broken the female hormone healthcare system is, right?
Yes.
And until we started to investigate. So we spent 3 years researching 7,000 people to come up with the insights we have. And in that, the vast majority of who needed the most help was women. And it was never the problem that they were dealing with. It was always something deeper at the hormone level that wasn't being addressed, because you're supposed to have hormone problems. You're a woman. You're supposed to have a crazy menopause. You're supposed to have PMS. You're a woman. Versus there's genetic wiring that is unique to each woman, and then inputs, environment, nutrition, lifestyle that lead to different outcomes, which is why some women are doing fine, right? So when we look at all that, today, when I'm dealing with a woman, which happens a lot, it doesn't matter what they're talking about. The first thing we always work on is their nervous system, their anxiety, their traumas, and their stress. Even though they're coming in for fibromyalgia or they're coming in for hair loss or whatever it is, right? And why? Because the estrogens that are more dominant in a woman, irrespective of if you're an androgen dominant woman, estrogen dominant woman, you're still going to have more estrogens than a man, right? Turns that fight or flight into not a warrior response, but a worrier response. Heightened sense of awareness, looking for problems, storing fat to be fearful of famine, right? Trying to protect the tribe. That's what happened for tens of thousands of years. When fight or flight happened, men went to battle, women protected the tribe. So you're wired for that. Put that in 2024 where everything's going to trigger fight or flight. You're going to have these outcomes that you see in women where you're solving the wrong problem. You're trying to mask all these diseases that are really rooted in nervous system dysfunction.
Oh, so you mentioned this before. You said about 85% of women at some point in their life will take birth control.
In North America.
This is something we talk about ad nauseum on the show, myself and Rollo. where he talks about what's happened. So first off, fertility rates dropping, and I'm like, well, birth control controlled births. That's what his job was to do.
Yeah.
But there's also, if you read the book Estrogeneration, I just finished it, where they go over this concept. If I want to filter out a bacteria from the water supply, I can boil the water. I can treat the water.
Yeah.
Estrogen is a molecule.
Yes.
And you can't boil it out. It's just a molecule. It can stand extreme hot and cold. And so it stays in the supply for a long time. Can you talk about what are some of the effects that you've seen from hormonal birth control on women, and probably one of the reasons, I'm guessing, why you have to treat so many women?
So today, 30% of American women need treatment to get pregnant. Unheard of 1 generation ago.
Yes.
2 generation ago, there was no IVF clinic,
Yes,
right?
that's correct, yeah.
30% of teenage American girls have considered suicide at some point in life.
Madness, yeah.
Why? They haven't. So our DNA hasn't changed in 250,000 years. We're wired exactly like the cave people of 10 and 200 and almost 300,000 years ago.
Yeah,
right?
you mentioned that before, by the way, about between 200,000 and 300,000 years for Homo sapiens, but for hominids, 3 million years of picking up tools, fire about 1.6 million years ago.
Yep.
But like this idea of sexual selection, reproduction, and higher status, we're talking at least 2 million years of that. And you're right, we're wired. When you're saying that, because I think a lot of people get confused, we could breed with someone from ancient Rome 2,000 years ago. And we could probably most likely breed with any Homo sapien going back 200,000 years ago, because saying 46 alleles, 23 chromosomes. If you go back far enough till we get like past Homo habilis, then we're probably going to have some breeding issues. But like that's where the species bifurcates. And the other thing that I think is really interesting is 27,000 years ago, there were multiple forms of hominids on the planet. Right. And then all of a sudden, they all just died off. And it seems to be some anthropological mystery, which is not a mystery to me. We obviously killed them. And then they just went away. And then you just start to see, you look at the world and you're like, how much violence there is out there and how countries attack other countries. And it's like, it's pretty apparent what happened. But going back to your original point about the birth control. Yeah. Now we're taking an ancestral psychology and an ancestral biology. We're bringing it to an evolutionary mismatch in 2024, and we're giving them hormonal birth control. And is that what you think the reason why we're seeing 30%?
That's one. But it goes beyond what women are intentionally taking to what they don't even know that they're exposed to. Okay. It's ubiquitous. It's everywhere. You drink the water, like you said, it's forever, right? The plastics, there was a study that just came out from this university in Belgium saying that indoor American air quality is now 4 to 5 times worse than outdoor pollution. You have to go outside to escape this drywall box that traps your fragrances, sunscreen, dishwasher, detergent, all that stuff that all has chemicals that are endocrine disrupting, right? They're all hormone disrupting. So these molecules enter your body doesn't know what they are, thinks that they're estrogen, allows them to use an estrogen receptor, which prevents you from actually utilizing your estrogens that you need. And those estrogens are highly inflammatory if not utilized, right? So neural inflammation, tissue inflammation, all sorts of stuff going on. And you also don't have the hormone cascade, downstream from that doing any work, which is why you can't get pregnant, right? You're not building the lining, etc. So, but it's also affecting the young men and boys. Like, go look at we see this all over the internet. Go look at what a picture of university or even high school boys look like today, right? Yeah. Don't look like what they're supposed to. Yeah. So the endocrine disruption goes beyond the diseases to just general. We have changed. We're not the same people anymore. Yeah. Our hormones are getting the wrong signals because a hormone is a signal, right? We're overloaded with that signal.
Yeah. And our genetics to pass on or to change would take maybe thousands of generations.
We have not seen any evidence of human evolution.
Yes. So this is another, I had a discussion with Dr. David Buss about this very concept, because there is no selection pressure. Even when selection pressure only happens before reproduction. So if I do something like, for instance, I live in the Pleistocene epoch, and I have no fear of heights. So I jump off a cliff. I don't have children. So the fear of heights proclivity gets weeded out of the genetics. Right now, I could have all kinds of insane proclivities and be a beautiful woman, and I'm going to breed with someone, right? If you look at Marilyn Monroe, her mother and her grandmother, they all had the same psychological disorder because they were beautiful enough to where it's like, I'm still going to breed with this woman. I don't care. And because there's no selection pressure, now you have people like, and there's a great example of this, and it's a good thing, was even the state with Stephen Hawking. He had motor neuron disorder and had multiple children before he developed that. So even though there were genetic deficiencies, he was still able to have children. Because there's no selection pressure against things that would have killed us in our ancestral environment, that's the reason why, like you said, there's no evolution. Like, why would there be? There's 400,000 elephants on the planet and 8 billion humans. We won. So in that case, and I read somewhere like 90% of large land animals now are pigs, chickens, horses, sheep, goat. Like we have obliterated bovine, like we're talking about caribou, water buffalo, rhinoceros. As far as the biomass is concerned, the vast majority of it now is domesticated human animals. And so when you come to that realization, yeah, I mean, it's a very different. A lot of the struggle has gone away, which is probably part of the reason for the depression. But these endocrine things that you're saying are also like huge disruptors. And I imagine you're going to get to this. The testosterone levels dropping over the last 200 years.
I mean, you talk about fertility.
Yeah.
Anyone listening, go Google this. Go Google male fertility. I think it's 2045.
Yeah.
Zero. Yeah, we used to have, there was a 1% annual drop in male fertility.
Wow.
And that projection for 1% takes us to zero fertility by 2045. It's now at 2.8%.
Wow.
So 2045 is actually a stretch. It's probably going to happen earlier. And so a lot of what we're seeing, so the challenge with male versus a female is that women are born with their eggs.
I'm a little confused. Like asymptotically, it'll get closer and closer to zero, but it can't actually get to zero.
Depends who's overseeing why we're getting to zero. And that's a whole other conversation.
So it would be some sort of external stimulus that legitimately like sterilized every man. So that's what you would need.
I know this.
Yeah.
There's people far beyond my sort of roles and responsibility to know this. So why isn't it being stopped? You have farms in Europe that are already being built for human breeding.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, wow.
They're live. They exist. There's not future. They work.
Yeah.
Right? So and you also have, again, whole other conversation, but this gender confusion, right? Why is that happening? So gender confusion, no more family, no more religion, and breeding, right? You now own the population as opposed to work for it.
Yeah.
So again, different conversation, but that's my
no,
view.
We can have that conversation. I haven't heard you have this conversation, and this is the kind of stuff we talk about here a lot.
But that's where things are going, because why did it go from 1% to 2.8? And the things, we know what's causing it. There's no secret. We know what's causing all the hormone disruption is causing it, and nothing is being stopped.
Can you be specific for someone who's watching this, the hormone disruption that they, like I'm drinking out of metal now instead of what I was doing before. You mentioned before about the sauna and the steam room. I do the steam room every day. I'm drinking a gallon of water. I'm trying to, whatever processes or whatever things are in my body fat, I want to get them out as quickly as possible. Can you talk about some of the things like somebody can do today legitimately that would be able to help themselves?
Yeah, so basic hormone disruption, personal care products. The average woman puts 500 chemicals a day on her body between her cosmetics, soap, shampoo, etc. It's personal care products. Purge them. Go to the environmental working group, a non-for-profit website. Just learn what is killing you in your home, right? Purge it, replace it. There's plenty. The good news is there's so many clean brands now. Just keep up with who's buying those brands because they change as they get bought. But whoever's clean, organic boutique, do that. Second is, what is your food being contained in? The packaging, the plastics, where is it as close to farm to fork as possible versus microwaved in plastic, fried in Teflon, etc. I would say the frying pan is one of the major threats to women that is misunderstood, and to men. The Teflon that's on there, major hormone disruptor, and as you scratch it, you start to leach millions, literally millions of plastic nanoparticles into your food. Microwaving your plastic containers, I think 1 square inch of plastic will give you like 14 million nanoparticles of plastic into your food. It's just ridiculous numbers, right? Our water supply, which now 30% of American water has forever chemicals in it. You have all this, fire retardants and all these things that go down into the drain that are forever chemicals.
Yeah, again, these are molecules
that don't break down.
That don't break down, and that you can't like sift them through or pour iodine in the water like you can. When I was in the military, we would take creek water, we put iodine in it, get the dirt out, and we drink it, right? Because it would kill the bacteria. But these are other things that you can't get rid of.
You have to filter. There's no other choice, right?
Yeah.
So there's this, there's a military base in North Carolina that had this elevated number of Parkinson cases from the veterans. And they're saying some anomaly? No, let's look into it. So when they did look into it, they couldn't find a genetic cause. And that they wanted to find a genetic cause because we need to make sure that Parkinson stays as a disease that needs treatment, right? That's what pharma wants. But the truth is the vast majority of these neurodegenerative diseases are not innate, they are caused. And so they did find this chemical called TCE in the water there, and they didn't find any of the other bases that they were comparing to. So simple neurodegeneration. There's a chemical called paraquat. If you go buy a bean, a lentil, a chickpea, some kind of vegan protein, these paraquat chemicals sprayed to kill all the other greenery around so that there's better soil and nutrients for that plant that they're trying to grow. And right now there's a lawsuit where there's 13,000 farmers who were given safety training on the use of this chemical. It's so dangerous that they have to be trained before they can use it. And even then have Parkinson's. So there's a class action lawsuit against Chevron, who's a distributor right now. 13,000 farmers, not 13 of them, right?
Yeah.
Huge numbers. And so like everyone that got exposed. So anyways, if you look at the American system, 144,000 chemicals have been added since the 1970s.
Yeah. Wow.
Food, personal care products, environmental, all of it, right?
Because storage and preservation saves money. But those same chemicals can, they're evolutionary mismatches for our biology.
Mismatches. Yeah, our body doesn't know what to do with them, right? Yeah. So, and when you talk about food, it's vast majority shelf life. Mm-hmm. That's a big consideration. Flavor enhancement for addiction. Yeah. And cost. That's it. This is why an American product has an ingredient list like this, versus in Europe, it's a fraction, right? Yeah. So just knowing that, and I would say EWG is a good resource, but how did your ancestors live? Not like this, right? It's not rocket science, so peel it back, go back, and don't assume that the 18,000 people that work at the FDA do anything for you. Yeah. Right? The bosses, not the people on the ground, but the people that they report to are all from pharma. There's no secret that pharma executives go to FDA and FDA executives go to pharma, right? So the regulatory body that's supposed to regulate an industry, the people that work for that industry work in that regulatory body. How is that going to work out? Yeah, of course. Same thing with the SEC. You see, it's very similar sort of glad handing. So here's the Dr. I believe Daniel Perlmutter wrote a book called Grain Brain, where he went over the concept of like we think of like an extreme aversion to certain to gluten as celiac disorder, but he talked about there's different levels of it. Like no one is completely not inflamed by gluten. Yeah. And then he goes over the concept of excessive levels of gluten causing plaque on the brain. Yeah. And then when I read that, I was like, what else is causing these plaques on the brain? And I was just wondering, like, when I hear you talk about this, it sounds very similar. Yeah, that's a big deal, where this is like things like dementia are completely misunderstood. Yeah. So there's a doctor that we did a research project with him. He wrote a book about this called The Reversal of Alzheimer's. And so this amyloid plaque that develops on your brain gets blamed for dementia because our research is in a disease-centric state. We study sick people because the motivation is to make a pill. The pharma industry wants people to get sick and then need that treated. They don't want to ask why. So there's a gene called ApoE, which so I used to do work on Marvel movie sets, right? We used to, during our research phase, one of the things we did, we partnered with some personal trainers in LA and said, give us the best of who you got that already has the best doctors, best food, and let us see if we can get them a little better, right? Yeah. That's the challenge. So they took us to the Marvel movie sets. We literally were making these custom supplement cocktails for the Marvel stars, right? Yeah. And so because we did that work, one of the producers that worked with Chris Hemsworth
was it David Maisel? He's the creator of Marvel Studios. Is that
no? We weren't working. We were working with the trainers, the personal trainers. Yeah. So the trainers that were each allocated to a star, right? Yeah. So so there's a gentleman who was producing a show with Chris Hemsworth, which eventually came out called Limitless. I think it was on Disney or Netflix, where he was challenged with all these various things, and we're supposed to do this genetic episode. Let's test his DNA. Then COVID lockdown came. Production got shut down. He was stuck in Australia. Chris decided to pick up a camera and he just shot it himself with a bunch of his buddies in Australia. So they did it on their own. Then I actually watched the episode and he was told, ApoE gene, you have an elevated risk of dementia. Okay. And that's kind of where it ended. Yeah. And I was like, how could you leave somebody with that? Because the anxiety of that will cause the dementia.
It causes the dementia, right?
Yeah. And so this gene, a certain version you're told low risk, a certain version you're told 8 to 10 times elevated risk, and another version 17 to 25 times. And that's literally what people are told. And it's like, wait and see and go deal with your doctor. Nobody asks the question, what does this ApoE gene do? Right? And the plaque is the concern. So it's a lipid transport gene. It instructs your body's ability to move cholesterol around. So if you have inflammation in your brain, your body is going to use this very useful hormone called cholesterol to go fight the inflammation. It's like a Vaseline that smooths things out, right? If you have some inflammatory toxin that caused the inflammation in the first place, it's also going to oxidize and damage the cholesterol. And then it starts to get sort of left behind instead of removed.
Another mismatch.
Yeah, another mismatch. So now that same ApoE gene that's not functioning properly because of a version you have didn't cause the dementia. It was not able to recognize that damaged cholesterol and remove it because it doesn't function properly. So disease-centric research, plaque equals dementia. This gene doesn't move plaque. This is the ApoE Alzheimer's gene versus... why did you have inflammation in your brain? That's the obvious question. Because if that didn't happen, why would you ever have plaque in your brain? There's no response. There's no cholesterol response, right? Why? Leaky gut. Leaky gut means leaky brain. Toxic substrates exiting your gut wall directly into your brain. Metabolic dysfunction, just like you said about certain breads and grains, right? Causing food, metabolic state that we were never meant to be in as humans. stress and anxiety, constant chronic elevated cortisol leading to brain inflammation. Inhalation, this is probably the biggest one. There's a gentleman named Dr. Tom O'Brien who's one of the sort of pioneers of the functional medicine movement. And he said, according to his research, today's dementia, 66% is airborne, meaning the chemicals and everything that we're breathing causing brain inflammation. And the last one, and this is why 80% of dementias in women is hormones. So the hormones that you make, you can do everything right. And this is where I see a lot of women stuck. I eat right, I breathe right, like everything is right, but I'm still sick. Because you also make toxic inflammatory insults on a monthly basis based on your genes. And those can exaggerate this inflammation that's already been triggered by everything else. So if you look at it this way, you then know the why, the very first thing we talked about, right? And if you know the why, you plug the hole, you take a detour, and the dementia never comes.
But the part that people have a hard time with is it's different for different people.
Yeah.
And your genetics determine that it's different. You mentioned you have one person who runs every day and it helps them. You have another person who runs every day and it's killing them.
Yep.
It makes them look older. And I want to, back to your previous point, I have an autoimmune disorder I developed while I was in the military. They believe it might have been my exposure to JP8, the diesel fuel that's there. And I just around 2012, I started eating paleo and it went away. They still give me Enbrel for my autoimmune disorder, and they want me to take it every week. I take it once every 6 months, maybe, when I have like massive inflammation and massive flare up in one of my spinal discs and one of my fingers. It gets to the point where it's just like really painful. That's the only time I'll ever take it, like once every 6 months. And the next day I'm like, I feel really crappy. And then I'm back, because it's like a cancer medication, right?
Yeah.
And I go to my doctor and I was like, yeah, I only need it once every 6 months. And no question of why. I was like, I changed but I know you weren't asking, rheumatologist, but I changed my diet to paleo and now I don't have this inflammation anymore. And I'm like, you want to write that down anywhere? Does that mean anything to you? And I brought this up to him at least 10 times, and it's like it doesn't click, because it's like stupid patient can't possibly understand what's going on here. And then I'm like, hey, I've read like several books that talk about all this gluten that I'm eating may have been causing this inflammation. Could we do something with this? Same thing, endocrinologist or endocrinologist or urologist. I'll have some of my guy friends will go to them. They'll get their testosterone levels checked, and they're like, "Yes, sir, you're in the normal range." It's like, what number am I? Oh, you're at 200 nanograms per deciliter. I'm like, normal range for what? It's like, yeah, no, this is what the normal range is. Like, what if I want to fuck my wife like once in a while? Can I do that at 200 nanograms? What if I want to run a business? Like, bro, what are you talking about? This is normal for me. But to them, it's normal. You check the box. The idea that you're going to let a guy under the age of 35 walk out of there with 200 total tests to me is criminal. It's criminal. I actually am afraid, I know this is way out of bounds of what we're talking about here. I'm afraid that exogenous testosterone has been so effective for men in the last couple years that you're going to start seeing people wanting to make it illegal, because you're seeing 45-year-old men, they're dating 25-year-old women, running a business, working 16 hours a day again, and they're burning fat. You're seeing these older men with six-pack abs again because of some of this stuff. And I think it's giving them an advantage that wasn't intended through natural selection, right? They're supposed to get more docile and back down, and you're seeing the opposite happen.
That pressure's already there. So all the compounding pharmacies are like, there's been raids of clinics that are selling peptides.
Really?
Because they work.
Bro, they do. I right now I'm 5 for 5. I've tried 5 different peptides and they do exactly. I pulled a groin. I tried BPC 157. Within a week, I was able to go out there. This is the Wolverine hormone. I tried Thymosin. Thymosin absolutely positively works. Ipamorelin definitely works. Like, my skin cleared up. Testosterone and I can't remember what the other ones are, but I've tried several different of these peptides, and every single one of them does exactly what they say they're supposed to do.
They work, and so now that they're working, and people have an alternative, there's a clinic that I know in Florida that literally the FBI raided and shut them down.
You know what's funny? When you consider the markup on, so if I were to take just anything that got me into better shape, let's say testosterone, whatever, you take some kind of peptide, or maybe you just get on ashwagandha and Tangad Ali, and you just naturally homeopathically raise your testosterone levels. If I do that, I don't need your ED medication anymore. So take that off the board, pharma. I don't need your anti-anxiety medication anymore. So take that. Oh, I don't need your Lexapro anymore. Okay, I don't need your ADHD medication anymore, because when I got on TRT, I was able to really focus. Like, and My workouts were better. The focus was like the world became more colorful when I got back on TRT. So, okay, now I don't need Ritalin anymore.
Yeah.
Okay, now all these issues. Now I don't have sleeping problems anymore because I'm doing hard workouts twice a day.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So now I don't need your sleeping medication anymore. And what am I making testosterone out of? Wild yams. I'm producing it out of wild yams. Do you know what the markup is on wild yams in comparison to what you're doing with Lexapro and Ritalin and all these other things? And so it's like when you think about this concept of just eating healthy or peptides and testosterone, you'll notice I'm not being sold testosterone by Johnson & Johnson. It's like like you said, some compounding clinic that's going on there, or some guy who maybe was in the fitness industry, he was a personal trainer or a bodybuilder or whatever, and they're selling it to you. And it's like, dude, this is a huge disruptor for pharma. I think this is a huge disruptor for big pharma. The idea that you get healthy not using their chemicals, and you're getting healthy using something that's made out of wild yams. I think that's very problematic for them, and I do think we might see that shut down.
Yeah, and we're seeing there's more pressure on the women's side than there's the men's. Because menopause seems to be not a thing anymore, right? Women go through this crazy thing called menopause that they don't need to if you understood the hormone cascade and what leads to these crazy symptoms. So menopause you have to go through. There's a transition. Does it need to be a roller coaster? Not necessarily. Got it. Right? And if you add bioidentical hormones done properly, because the same thing, I'm actually going to tell you a note about the celebrity's mom I was dealing with that was caused breast cancer because of her hormones. So you do have to be careful. But if you get it right, you're sleeping properly, you have proper bone density, you don't have osteoporosis. Women will get cardiovascular disease after the breast cancer. Most women that get breast cancer actually die from cardiovascular disease because the same thing that triggers the inflammation triggers both. Right?
Got it. Yeah.
And you get so weak, and the energy, mitochondrial function is not there. So all these things that are even just the hot flashes, even just the basic symptoms that there's 80 plus menopause symptoms now, all go away, and you just go through this transition in terms of the fertility, but none of the other roller coaster, right? So in terms of the breast cancer thing, here's another example. And I only bring this example up so that people know that yes, hormones, but be careful about what you do. Know that when you add something to your body, that's not necessarily what it stays as. There's genes that instruct, I see this, I need to turn it into something else. So there's this lady who called me, this sort of celebrity person that everyone would know. She's actually an athlete. And her mom got diagnosed with breast cancer. And she said, please figure it out. So what we figured out was she's 52, 2 years into menopause. That's the magic number. So I asked her, did you start hormones 2 years ago? She said, yes. I said, that caused your breast cancer. I'm going to prove to you why. So I looked at her genetic map. She is estrogen dominant. So there's a gene called CYP19A1. She takes her testosterone, aromatizes it into estrogen a little too fast and makes too much. Then there's a gene called CYP1B1 that takes that estrogen and converts it into something called 4-hydroxyestrogen, which is beneficial for some things, but highly inflammatory for most of your body. You don't have a menstrual cycle anymore in menopause, so you're still making it, but not getting rid of it. The body starts to say, well, this stuff is dangerous. I'm going to tuck it away in fat and tendons and ligaments, not to expose my organs to this inflammatory metabolism.
I think before you hold that thought, the idea that your body stores toxins in fats, I think people don't understand that concept. And the idea that your body will take that body fat and use it to aromatize testosterone into estrogen. That's another thing. I think a lot of people miss that. They're like, I'm just fat. It's not a big deal. No, that fat it creates an endless cycle where just imagine the 50-year-old fat guy at the end of the bar with the man boobs who's drinking a beer. This is the cascade effect of estrogen converting what little testosterone he has into or testosterone into estrogen. The body fat does it, aromatizes it, and then the cycle just goes on forever, and it becomes progressively harder as his body produces less testosterone and there's less protein synthesis for him to get that body fat off ever.
Anyway,
and
that's why when we're working on weight loss, we take people through stages. There's going to be plateaus because when you burn off fat, you're releasing estrogens and you're going to tell the body to store fat, right? So the people know that the plateaus are normal. Anyways, there's things to do about that. But going back to this example, when she added the hormones, what she added was something called estradiol, right? Which is the more potent form of estrogen. Estradiol, when you add it to your body, the CYP1B1 gene directly converts it into the 4-hydroxyestrogen.
It skips a step. It just goes directly there.
It puts it into that bucket, which is the inflammatory bucket, which she now at this age was no longer clearing through menses, but was storing in fatty tissue, which is where do women have fat? It's like bum, hips, breasts, right? So she has this toxic thing being stored in her breast tissue with these glands and ducts that were never designed as a cellular structure to deal with that. and you get this DNA damage and eventually a cancer, right? So she said to me, if that was true, well, then why did I have ovarian cancer in my 30s? And she was just skeptical. So I asked her one question: were you on the birth control pill? She said, yeah. I said, for how long? She said, 8 years. I said, well, at that time, same exact story. You added estrogen on the top of a funnel that converts it all into 4-hydroxyestrogen. But at that time, you still had reproductive activity. So the inflammation happened here as opposed to here. It's the same exact thing, right? So knowing that map, and this is so true for men. There's an NHL hockey player I was working with. So I live in Toronto, mecca of NHL training.
Yes.
There was a year, I think it was 2019 or 2018, where there was this phenomenon where all these trainers were calling us saying, my player has man boobs, can you help him? It was the same story for all these guys.
So gynecomastia from excessive estrogen, yeah.
Adding testosterone, thinking that, so there was an andro gel pack. That's the tool they were using.
Yeah.
Androgen gel gets absorbed in your skin. The thinking is, I added testosterone, I have testosterone. If you have a certain variant in the CYP19A1 gene, there's an instruction. Take it all and turn it into estrogen.
Yeah.
Right?
So that's a specific genetic thing that certain hockey players might have.
Yes.
Other people are going to just absorb the testosterone. It's going to create protein synthesis and et cetera.
For some men, there's a gene called SRD5A2 that converts it into dihydrotestosterone, DHT, the manly man
and
stuff,
then
right?
your hair might fall
lose your
out.
hair and you get prostate issues.
Yeah.
Right? So we had gentlemen that were getting prostate enlargement because of their hormones also. So, and it's not yes or no to hormones. It's now adding potentially like a fenugreek or a saw palmetto to block that conversion, or adding a DIM to block the conversion to estrogen. So just personalization is key to all this stuff.
Can I ask you about some specific sort of things that Andrew Huberman might talk about as treatments for health treatments, and you tell me the efficacy of these and your opinions of it. First, I want to go over is like a cold plunge.
Yeah.
Is that helpful? Is that what have you seen as far as that's concerned?
Again, personalization. There's a gene called UCP1 that is responsible for thermoregulation. And I've seen so many, especially women, that don't do well with cold plunging. So for the person who it works for, it's an incredible tool.
Especially women. Yeah, you're right. I can get girls to do it one time. I'm addicted. I do want to do it twice a day. Yeah.
So if you're wired for it, incredible tool. Neurochemicals through the roof, dopamine, BDNF, through neuroplasticity.
You don't need caffeine anymore.
You feel incredible.
Great. Yeah.
Now, if you don't thermoregulate properly, the confusion over that extreme stress after repeated incidences, like 2 weeks in a row, let's say, because you can't thermoregulate, you can't reset, the stress that it causes, your brain confuses that with battle. And it starts to pack visceral fat on your belly because it wants to protect you from the blade that might be coming.
Yeah.
And you see people actually gaining the exact purpose why they went to the thing to burn fat off your belly.
Yeah.
They actually start storing a couple weeks into it and they can't understand, well, maybe I need more. Maybe I got to do it twice a day, right? So then we find women that are more estrogenized or more estrogen dominant, same exact story happens a few weeks into it, that worrier response starts getting triggered. The stress put into this genetic profile versus put into this genetic profile equals a different outcome.
Yeah.
So great tool if you're wired for it, horrible burden if you're not.
Sauna and steam room.
So I think sauna is probably the one thing that everybody should do. There is some specificity around the different types and who should do what.
You meant the red light sauna.
Red light versus traditional. So the traditional sauna is more like a surface level stress.
Yeah.
So it's better for getting you into a heat shock protein stress a lot faster. So if you want neurogeneration, neuroplasticity, if you want cardiovascular benefits, so disease prevention. Anti-aging, mitochondrial function, red light. It's subcutaneous. It goes deep into the tissue. But women, again, have to be careful because the red light is subcutaneous, deep into the tissue. Silicone melts at 250. If you have breast implants in a daily red light sauna, we see women with breast implant illness that their sauna had part to do with it.
So no saunas for Las Vegas.
No
Las Vegas women in the sauna. Okay, got it.
Yeah, but in general, so I'll tell you a story about this. There's a study that was done in Norway. So there's a gene called BDNF, brain-derived neurotropic factor, and it's responsible for making BDNF, which drives neuroplasticity, new neurons in your brain, which helps you think, learn new skills, and maintain your long-term brain health. So Norwegian people have genetically consistently the worst BDNF, right? This causes, because you have poor neuroplasticity, when you experience something new, it has a lot of meaning to it. Sort of a risk adversity, right? Big drama queen response to everything. Meanwhile, they're also voted, sorry, not Norway, it's Finland. I made a mistake there.
Yeah.
It's also voted the happiest country in the world.
Yeah.
Because the sauna that they use daily more than any other country per capita in the world is a potent BDNF upregulator. So why do I say this? Because genetics is not a sort of, it's not the end, it's the beginning. What do I now need my epigenetic habits to look like to regulate my genome as if it was homeostatic in middle, right? So now that I know my DNA, my BDNF is broken. Gene says it clearly.
Yeah.
I need to do the sauna daily to upregulate BDNF because it does it so powerfully to maintain brain health, maintain my mood, not be a drama queen, learn things faster. Right?
Nice.
Yeah.
And then what's this? Is the steam room different from a sauna?
Oh yeah, you can't be in there long enough to induce the stress you need for that heat shock protein. So sauna.
How long would you need to be in there?
So you need, the first 5-10 minutes in you're like, this is nice, this feels good.
Yeah.
And then it's like, this is hell, I need to get out of here.
Yeah, around 15.
Yeah, you need 10 minutes of that.
10 minutes of the bass bar?
Of the hell.
I
when
can
you're,
do it.
When you're counting every minute,
So we're talking like at 15 minutes?
Yeah, so it takes you 5 to 10 minutes to get into that state of that anxiety, and you need 10 minutes of anxiety.
Yeah, I can barely breathe.
Yes.
I push myself to like 15, 16 minutes, and I stretch in there because for whatever reason, my body can stretch so much harder in the steam room. So
I haven't got to level, man.
But at the end, you're right. I'm suffocating. It's too hot. Intermittent fasting.
So same exact story, personalization. Again, especially for women, right? So in general, go ahead, men, do what you want, right? I do believe that it's a stress on the body, and I don't think it's like an everyday, always thing. Go through bouts, go through cycles, switch it up. Go through, I intermittent fast every day to I do a 48-hour fast once a month, and I do one day. Women specifically, if you're more estrogen dominant, more than twice a week, consistently back to back, it's going to make you sick over time.
When I mean intermittent fasting, I just mean you don't eat your first meal until like 6-7 hours after the day
like
starts.
A shorter eating window. Yeah. So even that for an estrogen dominant woman is too much if it's consistent.
Okay.
Right? Androgen dominant women, and again, genetically you can figure this out, not as big of a deal. Because the response is more warrior, less worrier, right?
Yeah.
The signal of, this is famine doesn't happen when you're more androgenized because you're designed to be a warrior, right? So I would say the big thing that's missing from this whole intermittent fasting thing, which is sort of somewhat new and everyone's doing it and doing it a little too much, is do mix it up. You need to shock your metabolic system, not train it to do something consistently.
Got it. And then keto, paleo, vegan, and carnivore.
All need to be personalized.
Okay.
Right? So there's genes around amylase activity for starch metabolism. There's genes around how do you break down fat. There's genes around enzyme activity for plants. There's some people where I tell them the reason you got sick is the day you became a vegan. And it's clear that your ability to take your kale and your spinach and actually turn it into nutrients, you can't do it. You can't metabolize vegan proteins. You're going to not do so well. But I also might tell someone that you need to go be a vegan. Like literally, they may be genetically wired for it. And it's very clear. You can see it. The big one where people get stuck is keto, because it doesn't matter who you are. The first couple weeks feel great. You get into ketosis, you're burning fat as fuel, you have ketones in your brain, everything feels awesome. 4, 5, 6 weeks into it, the ApoA2 gene, if you have a suboptimal version of that and you can't effectively convert fat into glucose and use as energy, you're going to start to feel horrible. Brain fog, hormones get disrupted. But because it's so far down the path, you don't blame the keto diet that felt so good in the first week or two, right? And we see this consistently over and over. By the way, with some very famous people that sort of pioneered the keto movement. I don't know if I should drop names, but someone who literally created it, we had to tell them that you are not wired for this, and that's why you're sick, right?
Yeah, I can definitely see that. Gallon of water every day. So
I think there's more to water than just a gallon of water.
Yeah.
I think we're underhydrated because of lack of minerals.
Okay.
Right? And this is where we're compensating by dumping more water in. Yes, we need a lot of water, and most of us are dehydrated. But a big part of that problem isn't so much the water as it is we're lacking the salts. The water's dead, right? The water, if you actually look at the physical structure of the water molecules, it's all broken. That you should have this beautiful snowflake when you see the water freeze, but it's not. It's all, the arms are all twisted and broken. So structuring the water, there's devices you can get that you can actually put your cup of water in. It will structure the molecules so they can actually cross cell membranes and get into your cell. Adding a pinch of mineral salt or getting minerals as a supplement so that you actually have the ability to get that mineral, again, the water into the cell. Also, what time are you drinking your water? The vast majority of your kidney function, your body desires to have between 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., right? So people that are drinking outside of those hours, especially in the evening, they're underhydrated. And also, how do you drink your water? When you're slowly sipping it, that's a signal to your body to metabolize it slowly. When you're chugging it and gulping it, it's going to come out fast also. Your body will actually respond to how quickly you take it in, right? So it's not just about how much I drink, but all these other considerations.
And then I don't want to include Ozempic and semaglutide, but all the other peptides except those. What do you think about the peptides?
So I would think great, but very soon you won't get access.
Yeah.
That's truly where we're at.
Yeah.
It's going to be like, if you want the right stem cells, you got to fly to Costa Rica or Colombia, or, that's what's coming. They work so well that the FDA is really pushing hard to get rid of them right now. So there's a few guys. There's like a guy named Dr. Kent Haltorf that has just built an entire legal team just so he can stay in business. And he's doing enough business to be able to maintain that. So there's going to be a few key players that don't mind fighting FDA all day long, but the general functional medicine practitioner is not going to have access.
And then Ozempic and semaglutide.
So I know there's a lot of talk around, microdosing is the right answer. Mm-hmm. And that's where things went wrong in the beginning, is people said too much of a good thing, and that's what made them sick.
Yeah.
Even then, why is this the answer? Right? Why is it's a Band-Aid? It's still a Band-Aid.
Sure.
Right? And if you know that you're metabolically unhealthy, it's probably the easiest chronic disease to reverse. It's like type 2 diabetes, type 1 for sure. We know we can't do anything about it. Metabolic dysfunction. The CDC, and it must be worse than this because we know the CDC is going to mask things, but they're saying that only 5% of Americans are metabolically healthy. 95% are
crazy.
Pre-diabetic to that degree, right?
Yeah.
So it's not about how do I Band-Aid this. What you're eating, your stress levels, your gut microbiome that people ignore, and how that affects your glucose metabolism. So yeah, it works. If you microdose it, it's way better than what people have been doing. But why is that the first place to go? There's so many more things you need to do first.
I think because it's easy. And I think the other thing that's happening is so many celebrities are using it and it's working for them that it's causing a cascade effect where everyone's. I don't know if you saw Brian Daboll. He's the head coach of the Giants. He just lost a ton of weight.
Yeah.
You see all these other celebrities doing it, losing a ton of weight. There's one study that just came out. I don't know if it's true, but it's talking about people's like IQ increasing when they're taking Ozempic and stuff like this. So I don't really know. I do know one of the things that's been frustrating for me is having clients for like the last 15, 16 years and seeing some of them like they just can't change their habits.
Yeah.
And I don't know what to tell them. Of course, I can't prescribe Ozempic, but I was like, I don't know what to tell them when this thing I think might work for them. And then I see people who are just morbidly obese and it's like, we got to do this now or you're going to die. So I don't know. Like, you understand what I'm saying? Like, there seems to be a line to where I'm like, I can see how this might be helpful.
Just like anything else in this healthcare system, emergency, go ahead.
Yeah.
Right? If you're morbidly obese, go ahead. If you're trying to get from 180 to 170, that's not the answer.
Yeah, for
right?
sure.
So why do I say this? You have this like, so the thing you said about that, the guy that, the athlete that he got the solution, it's working for him, right? What's working is what's being measured, which is you lost weight.
Yeah.
But you don't know what else you broke.
Yeah.
People have stomach paralysis. Truly. Right? People get off it and see what happens when you get off of it. What did you do to your metabolism? Right? So the check mark for success in the allopathic medical system is the symptom, the pain point has been resolved.
Yeah.
Not why did it happen? And by resolving the pain point, but not addressing the root cause, what else did I break? And I can tell you there's a lot broken if all you're concerned about is the weight melted. Yeah. Because there's many other things going on.
Like you said, you can't feel preventing cancer.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like anything.
Yep.
So the thing we feel, though, is the donuts. We feel the sugar, the fats. We feel those things.
Yep.
We look in the mirror and we feel the dopamine rush from seeing our body fat going down. But we don't feel preventing cancer.
Yeah. If you're still eating high fructose corn syrup every day, there's a study around... put somebody on an American diet for 6 days, which means high fructose corn syrup. Within 6 days, they have a 600% increase in lipogenesis, fat production.
Yeah.
Right? So if that's still what you're doing, you didn't help yourself with the Band-Aid. You're still going to die of something else. Yeah. Right? So when cardiovascular disease, dementia, something else is coming.
I don't know if you've ever read Jared Diamond. He has a book, I believe it's The World Until Yesterday. I forgot what it is. He's an anthropologist at UCLA, and he goes over when these ancestral tribes would be exposed to McDonald's, like what would happen. They'd be spending their entire life like going out and trying to scrounge for calories, right? And then it has to be a caloric, like there needs to be enough calories in the gazelle to make up for the calorie expenditure to go kill the gazelle. Yeah. And they're just in this constant flux in this battle, and that's why they have shorter lifespans, and it's it's a tough existence. They get exposed to McDonald's and become morbidly obese very quickly, and then almost always develop diabetes. And so that's one of the issues, that it's just a massive evolutionary mismatch. Us in North America, we've slowly been introduced to it over the last 70 years, but some of these people, the first time they're introduced to it, when I go to Europe and I eat their pastries, I'm like, I can't taste anything. What is this? And then I come home and I eat Krispy Kreme. I'm like, shouldn't all of your But pastries just taste like sugar and butter. I don't understand. I'm so confused. I go to the Texas State Fair. There's it's like fried butter.
Yeah.
I'm like, isn't this the way the rest of the world works? I'm so confused. So yeah, the other thing I want to ask you about is the concept of biological age. There's been some confusion about this. So when people hear biological age, I'm turning 47 this week. But people say, well, your biological age is it length of telomere? What is the thing that determines biological age?
Telomere is kind of like the OG way to do it, right?
Yeah.
And it's very effective. So, and here that gives you actually a clue into what biological age should be. Mm-hmm. There's studies around, so telomere, just so anyone doesn't know, your DNA getting oxidized and damaged is aging. So the DNA actually getting damaged, wear and tear, and then the cells eventually also getting damaged and unraveling to some degree.
So errors in mitosis that happen over time, and some of them can turn into cancer.
Yeah, and literal breakdown, physical breakdown. So telomeres are these caps or like bumpers that protect the DNA. Mm-hmm. And what's really cool is you study the physical structure of a telomere. They're designed to last 120 years.
Wow, and that's about how long humans. There were people 100 years ago living to 120 years, but the average lifespan was in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and now we get into like mid 70s.
Yep. Yeah. And so, but you do have today people that, for example, Okinawa, that have habits of their genome. They live in a jurisdiction where the habits haven't changed for thousands of years, that what they are designed for, 110, 115, 120 is very normal for them, right? So telomere, yes, that's kind of like I said, the OG way to do it. There's new ways. There's aortic stiffness. You can look. There's actually a device you can buy for it's like $100. It's called the iHeart. You put it on your finger, and it's through the pulse of your pulse. Sorry, it's measuring sort of elasticity of the cardiovascular system, which is a good marker for cardiovascular age, which is a good marker for biological age. You can get a Doppler scan of your aorta, and the plaque that you can see is highly indicative of what the plaque is in our cardiovascular system. So that also is a marker for cardiovascular age. There's epigenetic expression, which is probably where most of things are going because there's so much data there that can be like, okay, biological age, but why? What do I actually need to work on? Right?
Yeah.
Epigenome is a huge field that's like we're very like infant in terms of what we know. That's a big scorecard right now in terms of how are my genes expressing and methylating, which is telling me how far along the path I am. Yeah. Right? There's something called glycan aging, which is these glycans are literally slowly cooking your body as you're aging, right? And so how cooked are you is also an indication of how old you are. There's a couple other methods, but those are the primary. I would say epigenetics is probably where you're going to see most of it go.
And I think a lot of people get confused. We talked about this earlier, which is the concept of genetic determinism, meaning like I have this problem, therefore it's over. And I think this is, I'm reading Dr. David Buss's evolutionary psychology textbook right now, and he goes over the concept of like calluses. So calluses there's a genetic proclivity in Homo sapiens to develop calluses. When you rub certain parts of your skin, it develops more thicker skin. But calluses have to have an external stimulus in order for them to develop. They don't develop on their own. And so this is the same kind of situation where you talk about these genetic proclivities, but there needs to be some sort of external stimulus in order for some of them to express. Some of them never express, and then the ones that are like horrible mismatches to the world that we live in, full of estrogens and high fructose corn syrup, those have horrible mismatches. And then you see, but like overall, because the span of life is increasing, people are like, well, this isn't that big of a problem. But individually, we're seeing people dying of things that there's no need for them to die of.
Yeah, so we're living longer on average, but the average American gets their first chronic disease at 55.
That one's crazy, yeah.
They have 2 at 65, and the last 15 years is spent in treatment. So is that living? Right? Versus the person in Okinawa who's playing with their great-grandchildren at 100.
Yeah.
That's health span. That's what you should. Lifespan, a number of years on this planet, 66% of American personal bankruptcies are due to healthcare costs.
Yeah.
So you work your whole life to just try and stay alive by selling your home at the end, right? So that is not health. So the years that we're living is not an indicator. It's how healthy are we in those years. And for the first time ever, there's been a 3-year drop in the average American life expectancy. 3 years, not 3 days, 3 months, which that in itself would have been a major red alert. 3-year drop. And it's not because we're not living as long. It's because in the last few years, too many young people are dying. So it's skewing the data.
Yeah.
And we can get into a whole other conversation about why. But people have no immune systems now, and they're dying young. Right? They're getting all these complex cancers that are unstoppable, turbo cancers, as they call them. But to your point, what you said is exactly the truth that everyone should know. Chronic disease is entirely optional. It is a question of here's my genome, here's the jobs that my body does well, here's the jobs my body doesn't do well. Now, based on the environment, nutrition, lifestyle choices I make, my path is now determined. I can be on this trajectory, this trajectory. It's entirely my choice. Now, we don't make those choices. We don't know the first bit. How are we wired? And we also don't believe that this is true. We're not taught that. We're taught, go do whatever you want. And when you break something, it's a doctor's job to figure it out.
Yeah.
Versus don't ever break yourself. So it's exactly what you said. Chronic disease is caused. It's not innate. Yes, there's propensity based on poor genetic hardware.
Genetic propensity inside of you, external stimulus that can trigger. So it's almost like Schrodinger's genetics.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. You have to have both or it's impossible.
Yeah. So can you, just so that the viewer can leave with a few things here, I want to know what are the first steps. So I want to get a DNA test to know that I can't process starches this well.
Yeah.
Where can I go to do that simply? And then some in general things like, again, the steam room has been very helpful for me. Like I think recently in the cold plunge, especially for inflammation in my joints. Even though I work out every day, I'm still 47. I still my back, old injuries, I can still feel them. The cold plunge has been fantastic. What are some things that you can recommend in general for people to get tested and then for people to get treatment?
Yeah, so I would say I built a genetic research company, but what I learned is for everyone to benefit from it, the test is not enough. The interpretation is what people need.
Okay.
Right? Data is dumb unless you know what question to ask it. You have to know what insights you can derive.
Yeah.
So for this purpose, I literally stepped away from the company I created, and we hired a CEO to turn it into a healthcare company, and now I coach people, right? And I figured that, that again creates limitations of how many people can I possibly coach. So I host a free webinar every single week. Go to my Instagram. There's a link in my bio. Sign up there. Come to the webinar, and you're going to find exactly how I can help you learn how to interpret your DNA as opposed to give you a report about your DNA.
Yeah.
Why? The DNA that you're born with is the same DNA you die with. So if I learn how to read this instruction manual, it's going to apply to every decision I ever have to make.
I'm glad you said that because I talked to Ty Lopez about this. The epigenetic thing is a thing, but it's not as big as some people make it out to be. Some people are legitimately like, if I meditate, then my children will meditate more. Like they're really thinking they're I had bad energy and trauma in my life and I'm passing this on to my children. And I'm like, I don't think I think there's small changes.
Yeah.
For sure, every day I go out in the sun, the radiation from the sun is slightly changing my DNA, but I don't think it's to the level that some people are vastly, because they don't like genetic determinism.
Yeah.
And so the way for them to get around genetic determinism is epigenetics. Good energy now makes my genetics better that I pass on to my kids. And I'm like, that's not real.
So there's two halves to that.
Yeah.
If you have a significant stimulus, a trauma, your epigenome will start to express somewhat semi-permanently, and you will pass that on.
Yeah.
It gets passed on for about 7 generations. And we know this because the grandchildren of the Holocaust survivors are all told that they're neurotic when they actually have highly engaged nervous systems thinking that they're still in fight or flight.
Okay.
Right? And that's happening. You can measure it. It's happening epigenetically. 7 generations.
Could that be an in utero thing that's being transmitted, or do you think it's actual change in DNA?
So it's literally, it happens to you, and when it happens to you, you pass it on. So when you experience, epigenetic expression is, here's the gene that I have, the version good, medium, bad.
Yeah.
Add an input, I ate some broccoli or I breathed some pollution, that gene speeds up or slows down temporarily so long as the input is there. The one area where we know it's somewhat permanent is the nervous system and trauma.
Okay.
Because that's such an important thing. We're designed to not die. We're designed to survive.
Sure.
And some threat, don't know what the threat is, but trauma equals threat. Children should know. Grandchildren should know. Don't ever go to that bush again.
Yeah.
Right? So it gets hardwired in, but it's 7 generations, then it gets relieved. So there's some truth to that, but where the thing that the Ty Lopez's of the world are applying it doesn't fit.
Yeah.
They're saying that, I have a gene around cardiovascular disease, but I'm not going to get it because I'm meditating and changing my epigenetic expression. No. What you need to change is that you have bad hardware, which means here's a supplement that will give you good hardware. Here's the foods that won't cause inflammation. Here's the foods that will. So yes, epigenetics, but it's not just be happy and be peaceful. It's what's your nutrition?
Yeah.
What's your environment? What are you exposed to? And what is your lifestyle? How do you sleep? What are your stress levels? What are your relationships? These are the 3 buckets of what you need to manage once you discover what's broken in your genome.
I want to talk about a psychological mismatch because you did talk about earlier about people considering taking their own lives. 30% of millennials, I believe you said.
Teenage girls today.
Teenage girls today considering taking their own life. And how different we are from an ancestral environment as far as our psychology is concerned. It's hard to be depressed when you're hungry. Like you're out looking for food, right?
Yeah.
Every day is survival. And I remember, U.S. military boot camp or survival school. The last thing I felt was depressed. Everything I felt was we need to get to the next moment. And I wonder, if you have any studies on this, or if you've got any information on this, the mismatch of our environment about how little the struggle. I push a button and then food comes up. And on a minimum wage salary, I can buy enough calories, carbs, fat, and protein to kill myself, literally kill myself very quickly. And I'm just wondering if you have any, data as far as that's concerned, how that can lead to depression.
So much of that. Firstly, the best depression medication that we know of works 40% of the time.
Yeah.
Exercise works 80% of the time, twice as well.
Yes.
Right? Moving your body, convincing your brain that things are okay and you actually need to progress. And the neurochemicals will change. The brain doesn't know what's happening. The brain's relying on your thoughts, meaning that the conscious words in your head, the 40 million neural cells in your heart that are through emotion also thinking and sending signals, and the instinct in your gut, the vagus nerve, is also directly connected to the brain, right?
Nervous system.
So that's all these forms of thought are convincing your brain what's happening next. So if you can change the thought through movement, that's one. Now, having said all that, the systems that affect, am I depressed or not depressed? And in today's reality where you really aren't depressed per se, the vast majority of people that I deal with that are suicidal, depressed, have anxiety, don't have those things. They have a genetic superpower in their neural wiring that is in the wrong context. So for example, there may be somebody that has the opposite of me. They're very high dopamine levels and a very slow clearance. They are designed for binging, very deep, high quality thinking, right? Take that person, again, put them in the middle and try and get them to work on here's your 10 tasks that are due next week.
Yeah.
Right? And they can't because they hyper prioritize what they value. They binge, they get stuck, they clear their neurochemicals so fast. And do that week after week after week. They just feel, they're disappointed, they're frustrated, they're disappointing other people. And that load, which they were wired for a superpower of I am the expert, right? I'm the chase the shiny object, don't have enough dopamine. This is the specialist and the expert. Lock me in a room and let me focus. Trying to be the specialist, going to fry your brain. The second big one is the gut. I can't tell you how many people I'm dealing with that have mood and behavior type issues where they're medicating the mood and behavior issue when all we need to do is fix their gut. Again, direct vagal nerve connection, bidirectional communication all day long, leaky gut leading to leaky brain, leading to brain inflammation. How many mood and behavior issues get resolved by fixing the gut? I would say a good majority.
Yeah,
it's a slice of it. It's a big chunk. It's a majority.
Yeah.
Right?
Daniel Perlmutter in his book Grain Brain, he talks about, you ever seen the snotty nosed kid with the big inflamed sinuses, and he's always snotty all the time. I remember growing up with him, and he's like, we just got him off bread, and the snottiness just goes away. I was like, I remember that in the 80s, seeing that everywhere. These kids are just so snotty, just all the time. They looked like they were having some inflammation, and they couldn't grasp what was going on. But that was because we had that little food triangle. You remember?
Upside down triangle.
The upside down triangle. Where they told us you need this much milk every single day, and you need this much bread. Thank you, farmers of America.
Another big one is adrenaline. You mentioned that earlier, right? So there's a gene called ADR2B that regulates your adrenaline response. And do you have an appropriate amount of adrenaline during that impact, right? And so some people don't. And so when that thing happens, car accident, fight, or whatever, we're meant to hold on to and imprint that trauma. That's actually when the epigenetic expression happens. Car accident, big deal, feel the action. Epigenetic expression happens to avoid that location.
So that's the evolutionary adaptation, because that keeps us from dying. The trauma is the response that keeps us from dying. And so that would get passed on quicker than, for instance, change of skin color, which would take 100,000 years.
Yes, exactly. That's instant. It's and that's not a edit. It's not evolution. It's an expression. It will turn off, right?
Okay, yeah.
So now the person that doesn't regulate this pathway well doesn't only bind the intellectual memory of the trauma, they also bind the emotion. Which means the next time that thing happens again, they feel it as if it's a continuation. It's as if it's happening again. Have that in today's reality, 2024, where there's plenty of reasons to have trauma, problems, and anxiety. That person's going to feel like they're depressed all the time. And they just don't know how to describe what they feel. It's not depression. It's that all these reminders keep bringing the feeling back, and I constantly feel like things are traumatic. Right? That could feel like depression. So I only say that because there's so many things that also get misdiagnosed that need to be hyper-personalized in terms of what they actually are.
Yeah, I mean, part of the mismatch would be, 200,000 years ago, we have this massive expansion of the human brain. When you say human, we mean Homo habilis, Homo australis, Homo neanderthalis, Homo sapiens, all of them. And then, but they didn't have as big a brain as we did, especially in comparison to our body. And part of the reason why people estimate, anthropologists and evolutionary psychologists, is this is the first point at which Homo sapiens pick up the spear. Because one Homo sapien is the apex predator, but it's not one Homo sapien. It's a group of Homo sapiens working together through communication. So now you consider all this teamwork I use in order to kill meat, to procure protein for my tribe. Of course, I should receive positive reinforcement in my brain, the reward center of my brain. I don't think you and I have ever experienced anything probably analogous to the hunter who brings home the protein for his starving tribe 50,000 years ago. Because that's all they had. There's probably enough. Racing the Lamborghini does not come anywhere near probably the feelings they had, the reward they had. And so now I ask my clients this all the time. The ancestral male, which one got rewarded? The one who stayed in the cave and was sad for himself, felt bad because he didn't get chosen by the mate he wanted, or messed up trying to, kill the deer, or the one who went out and tried again and continued to try every day and overcame obstacles? Which one would evolution have rewarded with more offspring and better emotions in their brain? And then that's where your depression comes from. This is a massive evolutionary mismatch. This world has become too easy. We created we talk about calluses. We created a callus-free environment. Look how soft my microphone is. This chair is so soft that I'm wearing here. And so, all the things that we have here, my ergonomically prepared device here that has the world's information on it. And I'm like, I'm so depressed because Sally didn't call me back today. And I'm like, you live after antibiotics. I was reading somewhere before the year 1850, 50% of the Earth's population, or 50% of people who'd ever lived had died before the age of 5. Crazy numbers like that.
That is awesome.
32%. If you make $32,000 a year and you're in the top 1% of wage earners on Earth, and half the Earth's population lives on less than $5 a day, the top 10 wealthiest people in the world have the wealth of the bottom 60% of poorest people in the world. And so we just live in a very different time than we did before. And you can, on a middle class salary, fly to go see your family members that live 12,000 miles away, whereas your ancestors 400 years ago, they're never making it to Casablanca, Monaco. They're never going to make there ever in their entire life. So I think a lot of people don't realize how much easier we have it. And because of that, that's where a lot of the depression comes from. The psychological mismatch. And then the other thing I want to ask you about, you used the concept of sushi in the bowl. Do you remember? The fit sushi. And I really like this idea of how we are treating the symptom instead of taking sushi out of the bowl. Can you go over this concept of how we're doing this wrong?
So I did a TEDx talk that got removed from TEDx because I talked about the example I gave you about breast cancer. I talked about it, an actual example, which is 100% truth, which was vetted by the university I did it through. There's one that's still live, but they cut out some stuff where I talk about autism.
So you have the one about SUNY is still there from SUNY.
Sorry? SUNY, that one's still live.
That one's still there.
That one, however, they cut 3 minutes out because I talked about vaccines. So they cut it out.
Wow, okay.
The other one that I did was about this example of sushi, which is where the anecdote came from. And they just censored the whole thing because I told the truth about breast cancer. And so apparently the truth should be censored. So here's how you should think about health and what the truth is. If I passed you a bowl with a fish named sushi, and when you looked at the bowl, it was green toxic water. You would immediately react and remove sushi and move her to clean, healthy water. What we do is we take that sushi and we look at that green toxic bowl and we wait until sushi starts getting a headache and we drop a pill. And then we wait until sushi's skin starts getting messed up and throw some cream in there. And then sushi starts banging your head on the glass because she's depressed and you drop another pill. And then you wait. Eventually sushi's got a bit of a lump and that may be cancerous, so you cut it off. Instead of just realizing that sushi does not have the genetic ability to cope with the environment that you put her in.
Yes.
Right? The simple switch, the problem wasn't any of the diseases. It was the environment, which is one of 3 epigenetic loads: environment, nutrition, lifestyle. There are actually animals, there are fish that can swim in acid. The same acid that if you dip your finger in, your finger will melt. They are genetically designed for it. They don't have the threat that we have, right? So it goes back to what I said. We already know, or we to some degree know what we're genetically capable of. There's so much more we need to know. That prescribes for you what your habits should be and what the threats are that you should remove, so you don't make the stupid mistake we make in our healthcare system of throwing pills in a fishbowl, right? That's what we're doing.
Incredible. You also talked about a placebo gene, and I thought this was really interesting. Can you go over that?
Yeah, so we were doing some work early on when we first started research, not knowing where the business was going. And like any other biotech, you think you're going to work with pharma. Then when I started to see what they do, I was like, I don't want to do that. So one of the things we were doing was we were helping with clinical trials, and we discovered there's actual genetics around people that are more susceptible to placebo. And we said, though, these people shouldn't be in your trials because they're just going to believe it. And you know what happened to that information, right? We need more of those people in the trials. Yeah. So, there's truth to that, where there's genes around. It's not only the placebo effect. There's genes for that, but there's also genes around belief. So,
do you understand what you're saying right now? Like, there are people who are listening to this and like that have believed their whole life in total and free autonomy, agency, and free will. And if you take 10 minutes to study the hairless murder apes that we have descended from and read anything on evolutionary psychology, you recognize I'm not saying you have no free will, but what people think, like, here's a circle. This represents total and complete free will. You can choose between vanilla and chocolate ice cream, not vanilla and poop ice cream. Yeah. You can't, the sulfur acidic ice cream, you're not eating that one. But wait a second, I thought you had free will, bro. Yeah. Why don't you eat the poop ice cream? Yeah. Oh, what? No, I can't eat that. By the way, chocolate is a derivative of vanilla in ice cream. These are those small things. It's like, I like my wife. I don't like boob jobs, but I do like boob jobs. And it's like, yeah, but you aren't looking for morbidly obese women. Like, there's this small little sliver of free choice that happened because you grew up in Texas versus Afghanistan. That's about all you have. And then, but you think that it's total free will. And that's the thing. When you say stuff like this, for a lot of people, they're like, no, I thought all of these decisions came because I am a total rational human being, not recognizing that not only do you not have free will, most of the time, your decisions are influenced by either how you grew up or your genetic proclivities that cause certain feelings for you to have. And now, like, for the rest of my life, I don't like pickles. I don't know why. I just don't like pickles. My body just doesn't. I cannot drink alcohol. When I drink alcohol, it feels disgusting to me. I don't know why. And I can't eat shellfish. It's just a genetic thing. What happened to my free will, though, bro? I thought you had free will. Yeah. And so I think that's a part. Anyway, go back to what you were saying before.
Yeah. And so the other half of placebo, so there's the true placebo where you actually just believe it, and your biology will actually give you what you believe, right? Then there's a brain-derived neurotropic factor, which we talked about earlier, which I've found over and over. And the reason why we know this stuff is because I've actually sat in front of thousands of people with their DNA in my hand and talked to them. And I realized whenever it's like this, they always behave like this. Whenever it's like this, they're always in these sorts of problems, right? Because their genes drive them to that type of thinking. Their perception changes. Yeah. So I found that the people that were more religious, but blindly religious, that didn't understand the value that their religion was providing them, that were more into the dogma, had suboptimal BDNF because they didn't have the ability to, they were more risk adverse, right? And they didn't have that free will. So the way they approached their religion was the dogma, the fear. Yes. Fear of God, not love of God, right? Yeah. And so and now that would apply to anything beyond religion. It would apply to the way you work, the way you behave with your family, etc. So that in itself, your ability to believe or not believe, your ability to see past or get stuck in what you see, that's also driven by a single gene, right?
You have also mentioned the proclivities that you saw in your own children, and you were able to tell them, there were certain things you did tell them and certain things you didn't tell them. Yeah. And I just think, I'm not a parent now, but in the future, I'm going to probably, because of this technology, have the ability to tell whether or not they're going to have certain psychological traits. And I'm curious, like, what have you learned about your children? And then do you have any sort of like moral ambiguity about what you should tell them, what you shouldn't tell them?
Yeah, I just, anything that blocks their ability to, so if I put them down a path that creates guardrails where they no longer have choice, I'm not going to do that, right? Yeah. They should have the ability to make mistakes and fail, especially the boys. Boys need dangerous play. They need to hurt themselves. That's how they learn. That's how your prefrontal cortex develops, right? So the where I do protect them is what's going to hurt them physically and with their health. For example, I have a kid who I was told by 2 teachers that he has ADHD. I was like, screw you, right? That's not what he has. So what
that
was
seems to be the catch-all, isn't it?
Yeah.
For every problem, I hear the ADHD. Yeah. Like when I try to hire people who are a little younger than me, it's like that's always seems to be a problem that I'm supposed to have to work around. Yeah. And I'm just like, take them to Marie Kondo boot camp and watch how the ADHD just goes away automatically.
Yeah. Yeah. So here's the mistake that was being made. There's a gene called TCF7L2, which drives your insulin regulation. So insulin resistance or not resistance, right? How resistant are you to insulin? There's a gene called AMY that drives amylase activity, so starch metabolism. He had the worst version of both. The teachers that were complaining about his ADHD were after lunch.
Yes.
The time that his mother was complaining about his attitude was after dinner.
Yeah.
Right? When he grew up in a South Asian home where he ate rice and bread every day.
So it's a way his body processed certain types of starches.
He was in a coma. He was having a carb crash in a coma. And you expect that at that time to go study and learn, right? So it was partly what is he supposed to eat and when is he supposed to work?
Yeah.
right? So just unique circumstance for this particular child, but his sibling isn't wired the same way, right? So but I would say the biggest value that I can provide them is understand the thing that they have to discover and make so many mistakes, their neural map. Who are you? A child doesn't know, and even a 20-year-old doesn't know. I don't even think till you're 40 you really know, right?
Agreed.
So imagine knowing that when you're 15. And those decisions around university and career trajectory and all that stuff, that's one big one. The ability to actually know here's where you'll thrive and here's where you'll fail. Second is physical development, hormones. A 5-year-old who's being forced into football that is going to grow up to look like a ballerina, right? Well, how's that going to, like, you can't make that work out. So you have to reconcile that somehow. So knowing in advance their hormones that are going to drive actual physical development, who are they becoming? And having that cheat code. So those are the two big areas where I think a lot of parents can create value. Then, of course, there's their personalized diet and then looking out for disease in the future and making sure it never happens.
Yeah, the diet thing, man. I don't know if you're probably around my age. The 99-cent menu at Wendy's. My dad used to feed us for... I was like, holy crap. But I'm young. I don't care. I want to play football. I need more protein. I'll have the double cheeseburger on the 99-cent menu at Wendy's. And I did that for years. There's outside of McConnell Air Force Base in southeast of Wichita, Kansas. There's a place called Cinnamon's Deli. I love that place. And you would get the sourdough bread and these big old chunks of sourdough, and I would eat it, and I would go back into the skiff, the little top secret area we'd have, and I would just pass. But like, it affected me. I would look at my coworkers and I'm like, how are you guys not dead? I would give anything to go home and go to sleep right now. I don't understand. And then later on, once I switched to paleo, I was like, oh, that's what it is. My body does not deal with being full the way other people's do. In fact, I've done it before where I've chugged water and then I started feeling tired. I was like, there seems to be this thing where I feel when my stomach is full, it's like it's time to go to. There's a button. It's like it's time to go to sleep now. And it's just one of these things where, like you said before, I've just come to the realization. And you're right, 40. That's when I came to realization is I'm not doing this anymore. I'm never, for whatever reason, alcohol does not affect me like it does other people. It just makes me feel gross. There's no fun euphoria. I've never had a buzz in my life. I've never been drunk before. It's just 100% full on fucking gross. There's nothing. So whatever that is, I don't have, my brother seems to have it, but I don't have it. And understanding that those things are genetic, it's not just an internal will thing. That's one of the issues that I think, I think being able to map that out, you can make your life a lot better as far as some of these things are concerned.
If you always knew how to make the right choice, how much better would you feel?
For sure.
Right.
What I do want to know is the same regimen of exercise can help one guy and then hurt another guy. How does that work?
So there's a tennis player we were working with who, if I gave their name, like Wimbledon, US Open, like everybody knows this person, who was told they needed to take a statin for cholesterol. Best training, best doctors, best food, best everything. Like, why would I have a cholesterol problem? They're blown away. So what did we determine? That there's a gene called 9p21, which, so first of all, most cardiovascular disease doesn't happen in the heart. It's usually the arteries around the heart. So the inner lining of the artery, which is where disease starts, inflammation, it's called the endothelium. So the 9p21 allows us a purview into like how robust is your endothelium. Is it stainless steel resilient or is it more paper thin? So he had the worst version of that. Doesn't mean he's sick. Something, like you said, has to cause the inflammation. Right? Now, mitochondrial function. The superoxide dismutase pathway, it's called SOD2, determines every time I breathe and I have nutrition in my body, the mitochondria of each of my cells take those things in combination to make energy and make ATP, right? The energy store. So as a sort of an outcome of using oxygen as fuel, you end up making an oxidant. And an oxidant is a free radical, is inflammatory, it's toxic. And this superoxide dismutase pathway is meant to neutralize and get rid of those free radicals. He had the worst version of that genetic pathway. And what was he doing? Cardiovascular exercise all day long, taking in way more oxygen, over-oxidating himself, equaling oxidative stress, in a genetic pathway where he didn't neutralize the free radicals, in a genetic pathway where he had bad hardware that was so easy to get inflamed with now something to cause the inflammation. So in his, I think his late 20s, early 30s, he had intense endothelial inflammation. What did I say earlier about dementia? What does your body do about organ inflammation? It uses cholesterol to fix it. And if you have cholesterol being fixing a location that is chock full of toxins, it's going to get damaged and build up. And eventually doctor says, hey, you have a cholesterol problem, you need a pill. Right? What he needed was different training, mitochondrial function upregulation, supplementation around boosting the endothelium quality, like literally as if he had the good version of the genes, and recovery, more recovery. That was it. No more problem.
Do you think that a lot of this either comes from, like, so there's the question is always negligent or nefarious, right? Do you think a lot of this comes from the part of it? I think the technology that we have now to look at someone's genome didn't exist before, and then the monolithic medical institutions are just too slow to turn like a battleship to keep up? Or do you think it's a function where pharma is like, well, we can make more money from this, but we're not actually looking at what we're doing? Or do you think it's totally nefarious and people are deliberately trying to create these genetic insults in people? Do you think it's a combination of these things? Like I have friends of mine that are doctors, and I know these people are good people. They're trying the best they can. But whenever I bring up a book I read, they're so swamped in work, they can't keep up with what I'm saying and don't feel that they have the autonomy to try. They're cardiologists, like they do heart transplants and open up valves. The idea of getting and they have vague instructions on changing diet, but they don't really know. And often they themselves are overweight and they're cardiologists. And so where do you think this whole thing kind of lands? Could we have the same conversation often about hormonal birth control and the downside effects that have happened from that? And my response is, I think most of it's negligence. I think it's just a function of we just didn't know what was going to happen when we got to a point where 60% of college enrollees were women and we had hormonal birth control. What that would do to the dating market would destroy the dating market, where the bottom third of men have no chance with women and the average woman has no interest in the average man. We didn't realize that when the advent of hormonal birth control. And I'm curious, in this situation, do you think this is a function of nefarious, there's evil people in big pharma doing this, or do you think it's just a thousand paper cuts of negligence that happened over?
I think it's definitely both.
Okay.
I think the front lines, the clinicians, don't know any better because they weren't told what's possible.
Yes.
And they were told, you are the ivory tower, you are the single conduit to the truth, and what you've been told is the sole truth. There's no other way. And that's great for the toolkit that solves emergencies. Take that toolkit over to chronic disease, doesn't work. Right? And so they themselves are burned out and fried and sick of what they do because they can see that it's the same thing I'm doing every day. I'm not actually helping people. So it's a little bit of that. It takes 27 years for something to be novel to eventually get on the doctor's desk. That's how long the medical industry takes to bring something to practice. 27 years, which... where are we going to be in 27 years with AI, and is this microphone even going to exist? Like, meanwhile, say something that is by design, right? That is not someone trying to solve a problem. That is someone trying to prevent a solution from entering the market. That is the nefarious part. Right. So if I know I can solve a problem and I'm around talking about the problems I solve, people are hearing me, but they don't want the solution. Right. I'm from Toronto, Canada. I've sat in front of the finance minister of our health system in Ontario where I live. They've heard what I had to say. They're like, this is incredible. We can't believe this is a Canadian solution. Let's do this. Goes to some committee, some bureaucracy, disappears. I've sat in meetings. I actually sat in a meeting where there was me at a table, a few lengths of this, maybe 3 times the size of this, me and a bunch of pharma CEOs. In front, there was a guy that was hired by our premier, who's equivalent of like a governor, to determine what is Health 2025, I think is what they called it. We need to innovate to bring the budget down, but still deliver better quality care. So I came in and started talking about autism and talking about how, by the way, most of these kids don't need to be autistic. It's caused, it's not innate, it's not a genetic variant. And you can go on and on about what causes it, right? So they said, wow, incredible budget line, we can save this much money and people have better outcomes. In that meeting with all these pharma CEOs, the thing that was selected as what they would invest their money and focus on was a button next to the hospital bed so that a robot could deliver the medication instead of a nurse. So it would come fast.
Think of how many jobs you're creating, though. Yeah. The guy who, the people who make the robot, the people who deliver the robot, the company. Yeah. No,
and meanwhile, I'm telling them your $68 billion budget, 90% of that is spent on chronic disease management, which does not need to happen.
Yeah.
And the best thing you could do is create a button to deliver medicine faster. They don't want the answer.
Isn't it crazy?
They don't want it.
It does seem that way. And like, I almost worry that in the future, like I'm 47. I don't feel 47. I feel like our examples are going to become, you say I can't imagine, they took your TEDx talk down. That's madness to me. I think people, you saw certain individuals, they've been proclaiming veganism to everyone. Humans should not be eating meat. And now there's this onslaught of people online doing the carnivore diet, saying that it's causing them to lose a ton of weight. And they're not a permanent thing, but like they lose a ton of weight. Yeah. And I feel like when people have this example that exists. You remember Sweden decided not to shut down during the pandemic, and they didn't have the massive level of deaths that other places had. These examples that are counter to what the status quo is supposed to be, they've got to silence them. Because it's like, it's not even a freedom of speech, it's freedom of example. I can't even show an example. Hey, you know what I decided to do? Not take your pharmaceutical solutions and instead have a healthy lifestyle, have a really incredible romantic and love life, build a business where I feel engaged every day to go to work and solve innate problems. And then I feel much healthier and happier than these other people who are following the status quo. I now become an example of you being wrong. So I've got to take your TEDx talk off of YouTube.
Yeah. Everything that we were told to hate is what we're supposed to do.
Yeah.
Right.
Beautiful.
Culturally, that's what we were told to hate, and it didn't work. And now we're opening our eyes.
I love it. Where is the easiest way for someone to get a hold of you if they want solutions?
I'd say Instagram. I have a daily rant where I got to vent about something every day. So you'll learn a lot if you go there. Link in my bio. I would say register for our webinars. I host a weekly webinar because so many people want to learn. And that allows me to be able to help more people.
Sure.
Right. So, and then it's me. And if you need help, we have a whole team of people that can do it. But go to my Instagram, KashKhanOfficial, register for the webinar, attend, and it'll blow your mind in terms of what you'll learn.
I love it, man. Awesome. And you're using Zoom for this? Is that I have a lot of entrepreneurs that are doing something similar to this. Are you using Zoom for the webinar? You have like a few panelists and like about like 1,000 people like watching off.
Yeah,
I use
Webinar Jam, right?
Yeah.
And there's usually 1,000 or so people. Yeah. And it's just me. I just talk straight.
It's so incredible how much you can do. Like for other people, because I have a lot of entrepreneurs coming on here, how much business you can conduct now and how easy it is for you to show your expertise. Because you get to a point where it's like I have one client who's an accountant, and at first it's like I'm going to host webinars to teach people where they're screwing up when they're accounting, and by the end of it, if you're a business owner, it's like, fuck this. I'm going to let this guy do my taxes. He knows more than me. It's such a great way to start business. So whenever I hear people doing webinars, I'm like, this is a really great way to get people coming to your funnel. Also, the webinar is behind the paywall sometimes, and so big tech can't stop you from saying whatever you want on the webinar, which is also another really, really important thing. Awesome, man. Thank you for coming on.
Pleasure, man.
This has really been really great. I've been wanting to have someone in this space because I have a lot of my clients, especially some of them have weight problems and they have issues with like really bad habits. And I think the biohacking thing, I just finished Ray Kurzweil's book where he talks about the singularity is near, where he talks about the escape velocity for life expectancy. And so eventually we get to a point for every year added, we have 1 extra year of life expectancy. Right. And these happen because of certain things, genetic proclivities and things that we can change in the future. So the future is going to happen exponentially faster. Yeah. Especially with, man, I had a conversation with my ChatGPT yesterday, and it was looking up studies for me, and it found 10 studies I'd never heard of before on mate choice copying. And I'm like, we are on the brink of a completely new world where the amount of processing that we are able to do now is just going to be, you mentioned before in one of your other interviews, technology is neither inherently good or bad. It's the way you use it. So I think that we're on a brave new world, brave new frontier of where we're going in the future, man. Thank you for coming. And for the rest of you guys, thank you for joining us. We've got a lot more great guests coming on, and I will see you guys next week.